Okay, before we get started, I want to read the full name of this Big Finish audio that I'm going to be reviewing today. Doctor Who, The Eighth Doctor Adventures, Time War 6, Uncharted 1, Reflections.
What does that say to you? There's too many of them? That's one way of looking at it.
Who says that Big Finish is inaccessible to newcomers? I'm being slightly facetious when it comes to that full title, Doctor Who Time War Uncharted 1 Reflections, but this does follow on from Time War 5 Cass, which came out in January 2023, and this is part of the 8th Doctor Adventures range, so that's the full chronology title of this latest box set. But anyway, hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Mr. TARDIS, and welcome to this review of, I've already read the title multiple times, I'm making my way through the Big Finish back catalogue of 2024 releases that I haven't gotten to so far, and now we find ourselves back in the Time War. While the Time War range is where I think Big Finish do some of their best and most creative work, particularly the War Doctor range, I've got to admit, I was a little bit skeptical about this release, Time War Uncharted 1 Reflections, because it's a direct sequel to Time War 5 Cass, which, for those of you who don't know, saw the 8th Doctor meet Cass, played by Emma Campbell-Jones. Now, you may remember Emma Campbell-Jones as playing Cass in the Night of the Doctor short prequel story from the 50th anniversary written by Stephen Moffat. That's the short story where Paul McGann made a triumphant debut and we saw him regenerate. Cass is the woman who was on the spaceship that crashed that the Doctor tried to save, but that wound up triggering his regeneration. And I was quite skeptical with having the 8th Doctor reunite, or I guess in a retcon sort of way meet Cass for the first time, because I thought that might negate some of the impact of the Night of the Doctor. And not to sound like a slave to the Big Finish canon, but I thought that Big Finish did a great job of giving the War Doctor a Emma Campbell-Jones style companion in the War Doctor Begins Battlegrounds, because one of these stories, which takes place in a sort of arbitrary fantasy world, stars Emma Campbell-Jones as a pseudo companion for the War Doctor to kind of show this incarnation, the life that he could have had, in a really fun metatextual way. But then 8 months later, Time War 5 Cass releases, and it's like, oh, okay, we're just making the subtext quite literal now. And for those who remember my review back in January 2023, I wasn't really a big fan of this box set. I just didn't really think that Cass was an engaging companion. She didn't really do much in the stories, despite being spearheaded by a really great team of writers. And I thought that, with the exception of Previously Next Time, which was a really fun sort of timey-wimey Dalek invasion story, a two-parter, that the other stories kind of left a lot to be desired and there just wasn't a lot there. I also got the impression that Time War 5 Cass was assembled in a bit of a hurry, because it picks up where Time War 4 left off, where the 8th Doctor finds his great-grandson, Alex, played by Sonny McGann. However, Companion Bliss, played by Raki Thakra, just sort of disappears between box sets. Presumably because Raki Thakra has blown up in popularity over the past few years and it's much harder for Big Finish to book her for these gigs. So my theory is that they had these plans for this Uncharted Reflections box set with Cass, but had to maybe bring those plans a bit forward, implement them prematurely in order to account for the scheduling issue. It would explain why this box set literally named Cass. So this is a long-winded introductory way of saying that I think that Uncharted 1 Reflections is the box set that Cass should have been. This is a marked step up from its predecessor in basically every single way that counts. Now, Reflections is essentially a big 4-part epic. All 4 of these stories, Nowhere Never by Catherine Armitage, The Road Untravelled by Tim Foley, Cascade by James Moran, and Borrow or Rob by Tim Foley, all of these stories lead into the other. However, as is implied by the 3 different writers over these 4 stories, they do change casts, they do change settings, and also change genres over the course of this box set. Variety is absolutely the spice of life here, starting with Nowhere Never by Catherine Armitage. So Cass has gone missing. Honestly, I barely remember so little about Time War 5 Cass that I don't even remember what the cliffhanger to the box set was, but okay, Cass has gone missing. The 8th Doctor and his great-grandson Alex are essentially living in a military hospital, where the hospital matron, played by Helen Goldwyn, rules with an iron fist. Both of them have been injured, they make friends with a soldier, played by John Paul Roden, and every single day there are air raids which force them and the citizens of this world to gather in these air raid shelters, and when they come out, their minds and their timelines have been discombobulated. They're essentially undergoing temporal bombardment. That is one of the two divergent strands of Nowhere Never. The other part of the equation is Cass, who's essentially living this strange Groundhog Day / Stepford Wives experience where she talks to her fridge, played by Helen Goldwyn again. She's alone in this big suburban house doing housework, doing all of the chores, never sees her family, and then just wakes up the next morning and does it all again, with her days only broken up with these air raid sirens. And every so often an interaction with her neighbour, played by Hattie Morahan. You may have noticed over the course of this introduction that I've been naming the characters but just with their titles, matron, soldier and neighbour, and that's by design. That is the name and the title of these characters. They are given no discernible identity. In cases like the soldier, it's because they've been injured and bombarded so much by these temporal bombs that they've just lost their sense of self and all of their history. Whereas for people like the matron and the neighbour, it's because they are strange timey-wimey constructs in, like I said, this Stepford Wives reality, which Catherine Armitage in the behind the scenes interview also cited Mad Men as an inspiration.
What happened when I opened the front door? 1 second I was here, the next I was in bed.
I told you not to go outside.
I didn't, because the door just, led straight back to my bedroom. Or, I don't know, but you know what happened, so tell me.
Mrs. had a pleasant evening with her husband and son. You ate a casserole and lemon cheesecake. You played cards.
No, we didn't.
The dirty casserole dish is by the sink. The cards are on the table. You said you'd tidy this morning.
I did? Oh, I suppose No, I didn't do any of that. I tried to leave, and it was morning again. Or a new day.
A brand new day. And Lazy Daisy has chores to do.
Yes, the supper things. And I need to dust. No, I want to see my family. I'll go now. Visit him at work.
You don't want to do that.
Why not?
You know why.
Stop doing that. I'm going to see my husband, and then I'm going to come back and shut you down. So there. No. No way. Absolutely not.
It's a really fascinating listen. I loved listening to Nowhere Never. You've got all these inspirations: Stepford Wives, Truman Show, Mad Men, with a little bit of 2001: A Space Odyssey and a little bit of All Quiet on the Western Front thrown in there. And Catherine Armitage has somehow taken all of these disconnected source materials and has seamlessly knitted them together to build an incredible quilt of a story. And if that sounds like a laboured metaphor, there is a metaphor in the course of Nowhere Never about this hospital that the Eighth Doctor and Alex are in, which is built like a quilt of time, where they step into different rooms and each room is in its own pocket of time. For example, one person in the hospital is completely fine in one room, and then they walk into another and they've broken their leg because time is different in that room. It's such a brilliantly creative way of incorporating a non-combat area of the Time War, where it's this battlefield hospital where all of the denizens have been inflicted with some sort of timey-wimey injuries. Helen Goldwyn is so much fun as the matron and also the talking fridge, and I do think that Cass's interactions with the fridge and also with her neighbour are where the story finds most of its heart. Catherine Armitage has often put her gender politics front and centre with her Big Finish stories, like for example her Ninth Doctor Adventures story, The Beautiful Game, where the Ninth Doctor goes to the origins of the Football League, and Nowhere Never with Cass's subplot. There's parallels with post-war society where women were immediately moved back to subservience when the men returned from conflict. In World War I, when the men were conscripted and fighting abroad, the women had to essentially run the country, including running all of the manufacturing jobs, and they gained a taste for independence and a taste for work, and then when the men came back, a lot of that was taken away from them. You can see this in post-World War II society, particularly in America, where women were sort of subjugated into suburban dreamlike lifestyles. That's kind of where Stepford Wives comes from. All you have to do is research the amount of women who were on antidepressants in the 1950s and 1960s America, despite them seemingly living idyllic suburban lifestyles. It wasn't a good time for women. And that's the life that Cass is forced to live in Nowhere Never. She tries to leave through the front door to see her family and then just wakes up the next day. She even loses her name. She's just called Mrs. in the story. It's such a strong story for Emma Campbell-Jones as well. She gets some really affecting and hard-hitting moments in this episode. There's a monologue where she talks to her neighbour about the time where she stole money from her mother for flying lessons, and A-star stuff. I loved it so much. It's just a brilliant standalone monologue. If any of you drama students out there want a drama audition monologue that no one else is gonna take, maybe consider that one. I know that I'm going on and on and on about this one particular story when there's 4 to cover in this box set, but Nowhere Never starts this box set off so strongly, I just felt so compelled to gush about it. But the fallout of that story, like I said, these episodes lead one into the other, takes us to The Road Untravelled by Tim Foley. So the fallout of Nowhere Never has the 8th Doctor, Cass and Alex reunited, and they find themselves in a strange spaceship in a stranger environment. Now I will confess, I did get a little bit lost in the setup of The Road Untravelled, and that's because I believe it directly follows Meanwhile Elsewhere, which was the introductory story of the Time War 5 Cass box set. And because that box set didn't really make much of an impression on me, I didn't really retain all of that information. So I believe the Doctor, Alex and Cass find themselves on the same spaceship where they found Cass originally, which was the EC-141, and one of the crew members on board of that ship was Hieronyma Friend, who I think is a Time Lord, and in that first box set they were played by Jay Griffiths, but now they're played by Conrad Westmus. And if you've already started noticing a casting trend, you weren't the only one. We'll talk about that in a minute.
Welcome to my captain's quarters. And would you look at that?
Look at what?
On the hat stand. I do have a captain's hat.
So it's not all lies then?
Well, we don't have time for amusing headgear. You need to tell me what you're doing here in Nowhere.
Then sit down. Don't stand on ceremony.
You've got 60 seconds, Hieronyma.
Captain Hieronyma?
And then Alex and I are out of here.
Nobody's going anywhere. That's the issue. This was meant to be a shortcut, you know, a way of avoiding the latest skirmishes and getting our cargo safely delivered.
I'm sorry, you thought traversing through the void was going to be a shortcut?
Yes, well, not as sorry as me.
And when you say cargo, you mean, of course...
The accumulator.
The unstable sphere of temporal shenanigans?
Leave the poor descriptions to your great-grandfather, Alex. It doesn't suit you. Yes, the device stores temporal energy, provides a safe haven for weapons testing. Or would you two prefer the powers that be to try their devices of death on living civilizations?
I'd prefer they didn't have those devices at all. Who's your client?
As in, which side are they on? Would it really make a difference? I'm not here to make a profit, Doctor. I'm here to balance things out. I am a diplomat.
But you will make a profit, I presume.
Well, I won't be getting the early one bonus. I've no idea how long we've been out here.
The EC-141 is flying in the void, i.e. the same void that the Void ship was in the 2-part Series 2 finale, Army of Ghosts and Doomsday. And because of the nature of the void, and because of the nature of the ship they're piloting, when they look at their radar, they just see reflections of the ship on their radar screen. They don't know what's real out there, and they don't know what's a reflection. It's a race against time to get out of the void, for the 8th Doctor to figure out what Hieronyma Friend's deal actually is, and to discern what is real and what is a reflection, which could even include Cass's own existence. A lot of The Road Untravelled is working with setting up future story arcs and future mysteries for the 8th Doctor, Alex and Cass in the Time War. The most explicit one being, who is Hieronyma Friend and what is her deal? And I say her deal despite being played in this box set by Conrad Westmus, because that's the pronouns they use and they're not really sure on what her identity is. They were played by Jay Griffiths in the last box set, who played Audacity, who was an 8th Doctor companion. They also had Hattie Morahan play the neighbour, who is apparently meant to be the same character from that first story. Hattie Morahan plays the 8th Doctor companion Helen in Big Finish, and Conrad Westmus played Corez, also with the 8th Doctor and Charlie. So Hieronyma is taking the faces of 8th Doctor companions for whatever reason we don't quite know yet. There's a lot of really interesting ideas in the heart of The Road Untravelled. You've got this being in the centre of the ship that's sort of rooted into the infrastructure called the Cinza, played by Amara Karen, who is this time-sensitive creature which can apparently look into the Doctor's past. You also have Michaela Graff, who's played here by Dempsey Bovell, who apparently in an alternate timeline had a much closer and more intimate relationship with Cass than Cass remembers. But I think the main theme in The Road Untravelled comes from its title, The Road Untravelled. It's the idea of these alternate lives, the lives that you could have lived, the ones that other people remember that you don't, and the temptation that comes from exploring that. Hieronyma Friend is clearly trying to manipulate Alex, and as I alluded to in my Susan's War Family Ties review, there's clearly something that they're going to have to come to blows at some point with the idea that Susan is out there thinking that her son is dead, but is now having adventures with the Eighth Doctor. And is this the actual Alex? Is this a clone? Is this some Dalek concoction? Is this some alternative version? And the Doctor is keeping all of these secrets from Alex, and Hieronyma Friend wants to sort of twist that knife in, with some very explicit Adam and Eve allegories, being tempted by some mystical fruit, because Tim Foley knows writers who use subtext and they're all cowards. You also have the repeating of the poem Goblin Market by Christina Rossetti, which you may remember from the Doctor Who TV story Midnight. We must not look at goblin men, and we must not buy their fruits. Who knows upon what soil they fed their hungry, thirsty roots? It's a repeated motif at the heart of this story, which goes on to set up not just the rest of the box set, but seemingly the near future of the Eighth Doctor, Alex and Cass in the Time War proper, which further adds credence to the idea that the Cass box set from 2023 was probably a filler box set while they try to figure out the story logistics, leading into Cascade by James Moran, and it feels like a pun that was just waiting to happen. After the events of The Road Untravelled, Cass finds herself just splintered in her timeline. The Eighth Doctor and Alex don't remember her. She wakes up on this spaceship, which is on its way to crash into a sun. And every couple of minutes, Cass finds herself warping to a different point in the story. She starts the story in the restaurant of the spaceship before everything hits the fan. Then she's warped to the very end of the story where the day has been saved and the Eighth Doctor and Alex are on their way back to the TARDIS. And every single time she's meeting the Eighth Doctor and Alex for the first time, Cass is retaining all of the memories, but the Eighth Doctor and Alex have completely forgotten everything about her. So Cass needs to solve the mystery on the spaceship to find out who this saboteur is who's causing it to crash into the sun, and try and find a way to break through the amnesia that the Eighth Doctor and Alex have got of her existence.
Electronic garden. Expensive one, too. I like how they've done the parallax with the sky. It's clever.
There you are. I thought you were right behind me.
I don't think so. We've just walked in. Hello, I'm the Doctor. This is Alex.
Hello.
We've just done introductions back in the restaurant. Did you find out who just tried to kill you?
Nobody just tried to kill us. Not recently, anyway. Are you sure you've got the right people?
I'm really not sure, no. Do you remember the restaurant? We met in there. You tried talking to an android and everything got confusing.
We haven't been here for long. We got pulled in somehow. The engine's cut out. And you are...
Cass. I'm Cass. We literally just met. And we've met before. I've known you before any of this.
Sorry, I don't think so.
You're welcome to join us, though, until we figure this all out.
I thought I already did. Yes, come on. Let's go and try and find out what's happening, because something definitely is.
Oh, I'm sure of it. Always something going on somewhere.
Sort of a hazard of the job, really.
What exactly is your job?
That's hard to explain. Basically, we just turn up, poke around, uncover some dodgy stuff, find out who's responsible, grandstand a bit, and then...
And then what? Oh, not again. Stop disappearing! Now where am I?
Now, there's one big issue with Cascade that I was able to overlook, but it might be a deal breaker for some of you listening. I just was not remotely invested in the immediate stakes of the story, as in who was causing the spaceship to crash into the sun. Honestly, I couldn't really care. The cast in the story is really small, so just who you think is the person who was the saboteur, they were probably the saboteur. The story tries to throw in a red herring, but because the cast is small, it's obviously a red herring. You don't buy it for a second. But if you can overlook that, it's such a fascinating metatextual commentary on Cass's existence as a companion in the expanded universe of Doctor Who. Cass is struggling to piece together the non-linear sequence of events of what is essentially just a typical episode of Doctor Who. And not only that, she's actively fighting and campaigning for her existence as a companion. It's almost like Stephen Moffat's Heaven Sent, except instead of the Doctor persevering in a time loop again and again fighting for their right to survive, it's the companion. And I know just comparing an episode to Heaven Sent immediately puts it on a pedestal, but that's really the closest comparison I can make for Cascade. The question, the main concern I had going into Doctor Who Time War 5 Cass in early 2023 was, okay, why is Cass a companion? why are you telling this story? And it feels like Cascade, or this box set more broadly, is her almost literally fighting for her right to be a companion and to be part of the adventure. It's really enthralling to listen to. Like, Cass is trying to interrupt the status quo of the Eighth Doctor and Alex going through a standard day in their life and just pleading with them to remember and accept her as a part of the family. This story, and also Nowhere Never, is where Emma Campbell-Jones really does her best work. And I can see the ripple effects of this episode in particular maybe having hard-hitting consequences later on when this companion-doctor relationship has to inevitably break up, and then you can lead it into the Night of the Doctor for some really tragic consequences or something. I'm really glad that James Moran was able to contribute another story to this box set, because his previously Next Time two-parter was the easy standout of the last Cass box set, so I hope he comes back for more with this companion and doctor dynamic. Also, Cascade has the funniest behind-the-scenes interviews, where Paul McGann is doing interviews alongside his son, who is also producing the box sets and playing Alex in these stories. And it's so fun just listening to Paul be super Liverpudlian when talking with Sonny. Like, I know Paul McGann is a Scouser, and when he plays the Eighth Doctor, he goes full received pronunciation, but in behind-the-scenes interviews, he's only a little bit Scouse, and then with Sonny, when he's doing these interviews together, he just, like, lets loose, and he's just full, unadulterated Scouse. It's just really funny. And everything in the box set comes to a head in the final chapter, Borrow or Rob, by Tim Foley. The TARDIS team and Hieronyma Friend are back on the EC-141. The seed of doubt that Hieronyma Friend has placed in the mind of Alex regarding his great-grandfather's relationship with him is starting to bloom. The spaceship comes under attack from a surprise Time War foe that I will not spoil here, and we start asking questions that will lead into the future of this range, and also questions that go as far back as the Doctor leaving Gallifrey in the first place with the TARDIS. The title, Borrow or Rob, is not only a palindrome, as in it is the same backwards as it is forwards, but it's also being framed here as a question akin to Doctor Who, as in, did the Doctor, all of those centuries ago when he took the TARDIS, did he borrow it or did he rob it from his people? And the Cinza, the time-sensitive creature on board of the spaceship, starts asking some questions which really get into the heart of the Doctor's mystery origin. That stuff is really fascinating and interesting, and I can't wait to see it unfold over the course of future box sets, but the character work in Borrow or Rob is also really terrific. There's a really great interrogation scene with the Eighth Doctor and Friend, where we can almost start seeing that transition from the Eighth Doctor to the warrior war Doctor who he needs to become later in life, but still the Eighth Doctor does not cross that invisible line just yet. But also you have Alex's existential crisis as to what it means to be a Doctor Who companion. Much like Cass in Cascade had to fight for her right to be a companion, Alex is now coming to terms with what being a Doctor Who companion could actually mean in the long run. He has this really great line later on when he talks about the Doctor potentially burning through companions like matches. It's some really great dialogue and great acting on the part of Sonny McGann. I'm not going to play a clip, I'm not going to allude to much more because this is the final chapter in a 4-hour story, so spoilers will be abound, but Borrow or Rob brought Uncharted 1 reflections to a really satisfying and epic finale, which will lead into, inevitably, Uncharted 2. We don't have an official release date for the sequel box set yet, but presumably it will come out in November or December 2025. Or maybe not. Remember, Time War 5 Cass came out in January 2023, and its sequel came out in October 2024, so we could be waiting maybe until early 2026 for the follow-up to this. Which is a shame because it's setting up some really interesting and compelling threads. It ends on one hell of a cliffhanger, and I want to learn more. I want to follow these characters more. I was not expecting that going into this because, like I said, I wasn't a fan of Time War 5 Cass. I didn't really like the idea of bringing Cass back. I thought the stories, despite being assembled by a really great team, which I guess weren't very compelling or interesting. But then fast forward almost 2 years later, and I can't wait to see what happens next. This is a terrific quadrilogy of stories in one epic box set written by 3 top-tier writers. This was so strong. This might make my top 10 for the year. I don't know just yet because, you know, so much of it is set up. Tim Foley is clearly sowing a lot of seeds, is really like getting a lot of the mystery elements in here, but the Road Untravelled and Borrow or Rob are mainly set up stories for the next box set or what's happening next to these characters. Whereas Catherine Armitage and James Moran, they're not strictly standalone stories, but they are the ones that rely most on characters and are the most individual. And I think that is where the box set excels. Catherine Armitage and James Moran did a terrific job, and James Foley, I'm really hoping that Chad Tim Foley can stick the landing in future. Time will tell if Time War 6 Uncharted 1 Reflections from Doctor Who The Eighth Doctor Adventures is going to pan out in the long run, but as a box set on its own right here, right now, it's compelling. With great performances by all of the cast, including Paul McGann and Sonny McGann, but Emma Campbell-Jones just takes these metatextual elements of why is Cass a companion, what is she doing here, how can she justify her existence. She takes that subtext and just leapfrogs over everyone to make it the heart of the conflict. So yeah, that was my review of Doctor Who Time War Uncharted 1 Reflections. Let me know your thoughts on the mysteries and all of the stories that took place in it. What's your favourite 8th Doctor Time War story as well? Let me know stuff in the comment section below, and don't forget to subscribe for more Doctor Who and Big Finish reviews. Hit the like button down below because it really helps me out in the YouTube algorithm, and folks, I will see you all next time.